Did you ever wonder how sound design works? How can you shape an electronic sound to create a specific texture? Or what is this spaghetti incident? Well, it sounds like you might be into modular synthesis, where conglomerates of cables team up to build iconic sounds.
People with big eyes wondering what's happening here.
Let's see how this works. Hello, this is Alvin Rowe. Today we are exploring the world of modular synthesis and Eurorack. And to do that, I'm in Utrecht to visit the event series Modulation. Modulation is an event series that brings together creators, enthusiasts and newcomers to explore the world of modular synthesis. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, it's a space to experiment, discover and learn from the community.
Modulation started 10 years ago at the old Tivoli building, which was then occupied by Cartopia, collective of musicians and other artists. We could use the building for our studios. 2 years before I bought my first modules and I had a good system. I was like, I want to play, and I was very much inspired by Noodle Bar in Rotterdam. And then I thought, hey, there's this whole group of people in the Netherlands, it'd be nice to invite them as well. So basically all the people who also played at Noodle Bar, and maybe some people I knew myself, and suddenly that grew, and we could use the Kaitopia room all the time, and we had a good agreement with them. And then suddenly something weird happened. The third time I was asked by a local local kind of techno festival called Stekker, if I would join them, and they were doing a week with musicians in the studio where they could all record. It was also in my studio, my Sonar Traffic studio. So they invited me, do you want to join in that? And all the musicians were in my studio. They also said, you should do a modulation in the week of the festival. And so I said, yeah, cool, we can do that. And suddenly we were doing that, and on my third event, okay, watch out. These were the people playing. Niels Falafelbiels, who's a friend of mine from the modular scene. And after him was Mark Verbos from Verbos Instruments. He's a very famous modular synth maker. And after him was Colin Benders, doing his first ever modular performance. And after him was Richard Devine, who is a world famous sound designer who works for Apple and designed the sounds of the Jaguar e-car, you know. And that was the third time we had that event. So that was kind of crazy. And then suddenly, even the first time I thought, 20 people will come and I'll know all of them. But even the first time, 40, 50 people showed up, and I was amazed. And that's kind of grown into now steadily around 100 people show up for this event. I think that's a lovely bunch. And sometimes it's new people, sometimes people who come every time. It's become kind of a community.
So what is modular synthesis? Imagine a popular synthesizer with a keyboard. Modular synthesis does what's inside of it, using individual modules, each one with a unique job. You've got oscillators that generate sound waves. The sine wave is the smoothest one, while saw or square create a stronger basic sound. Then filters and envelopes shape that sound, and sequencers create rhythmic patterns. The best thing about synthesis is having complete control over how your sound is created, and you're free to experiment with endless combinations. Theoretically, you could recreate any existing sound or create one that never existed. At its core, modular synthesis is about exploration. The first time I attended at one of the events at Kaitopia, I was very impressed by the way you make this very accessible for people who are into it, but also just people who are curious, because you introduce all the artists and give a bit of an insight into their instrumentation. And I think it's very nice that then in between performances, the audience can just walk around the table and check out the gear. And I was wondering, since this feels like community-based, but also I feel like there is a lot of exchange, and I was wondering what are the things that you learned from dealing with a lot of other artists in the field?
For me, when I first visited the modulation events, also in the old Kaitopia, I was like, oh wow, these big machines, and I will never have one of my own, or can I build something like this, or you have all these questions. And then starting to talk to people, sometimes they are more from studio life, sometimes they are more tinkerers that want to build an electronic instrument. And then modulation is sort of this crossover event where you have people that work, use modular as work, and then who use it as hobby. And it's nice to have this mingle of all these communities together.
Basically, this was originally never the plan, but it's something that grew naturally. I always wanted to present the people who were playing, then I thought of, hey, wait a minute, maybe it's really nice for everybody to come and have a talk to the artists after the show, because I see people with big eyes wondering what's happening here. Well, come on to talk to the people who were displayed. They can tell you something about what they did. You can share experience and share knowledge and get inspired. And it's really become a place where not only professionals or enthusiasts come, but also people who are interested, who have no idea, or lay people, for lack of a better word, and ideas and techniques get interchanged among each other, and that's something that basically grew, and which is something I absolutely love and what we really want to promote now.
Now let's rewind a little. Back in the 1950s and 60s, synthesizers were very big and expensive machines that were only found in research labs, universities, or some radio stations. They gave space to pioneer composers to create the basis of what we now know as electronic music. These instruments were massive, sometimes they were taking an entire room, and they were definitely not practical for most musicians. Then pioneers like Robert Moog and Don Buchla came along and changed everything. They made synthesizers affordable and user-friendly, turning them into tools that actually musicians could use. The Mini Moog, released in the early 1970s, was a game changer. It was portable, smaller, and designed for live performance, perfect for musicians who wanted to create sounds on the fly. Moog and Buchla didn't just make synthesizers more accessible, they also helped standardize the format with its pros and cons. Also before them, synthesizers were not designed to work together. Moog introduced a system that would make it possible for musicians to combine modules from different companies, which paved the way for the Eurorack format we use today. Eurorack became the universal standard for modular synthesis, making it easier than ever to build custom systems. Thanks to the rise of Eurorack, modular synthesis became a thriving part of music production. It's a world where anyone, from the experimental artist to the mainstream producer, can explore sound in a unique and personal way. Whether you're creating ambient atmospheres, pounding techno rhythms, or you want to twist the sound of your rock band, modular synthesis offers infinite creative freedom.
In the beginning, the synthesizer systems were very open, and they became more closed and more closed, going from pre-patched to only presets. Like with Yamaha DX7 or Korg M1, basically they had presets and samples or FM synthesis presets that it was really hard to get into editing to. And then somewhere in the 90s, Mr. Dieter Dupfer made a brilliant move of thinking, hey, I miss those old modular synthesizers where I could really make my own synthesizer from components, basically. And thought of a way to do that relatively cheap. I say relatively cheap because, of course, it's still very expensive to get in this hobby. But the other brilliant thing that he did is say, I'm going to document the way I do this and just put this on my website. So the cases I use and the format of the strips and power that I use, I'm going to document it and put it on my website. So if you want to build it yourself, you can do this. So this kind of revolutionized the whole Eurorack system, because suddenly some other companies said, hey, Dupfer makes all these really nice things, but I actually want to build this. And that's somebody who thought, I need this functionality, and started building it, and suddenly figuring out, hey, maybe somebody else wants this too. And before it took like a little while, it took like a couple of years, and then around 2010 that really picked up and exploded into now hundreds of companies making Eurorack modules. And also, this is again where Veerle comes in again, because I don't really DIY, I don't know really how to work a soldering iron. She really does. The whole DIY scene that's around that makes it even more accessible, because then it's just you have to get the parts that are relatively cheap, but you have to do the work yourself, you have to build them yourself. And this is something that maybe Veerle can talk more about.
Yeah, or just for the topic of where it stands now, I feel like there's a lot of open source accessibility to making modules, but also for the developers, and there's a lot of exchange. And sometimes I feel like, okay, it could be competitive, but it's also a lot of like helping each other or communicating makers.
Competition is so 1980s.
Yeah, or just like this, people help each other. So then you have this growth of like all these modules and all these different types of modules arriving in the scene, and they're all like a little bit different, because a maker would say, oh, I love this thing, but it lacks this, and then they add something. But I feel now it's a lot, like a lot of modular is getting very popular, but then also, yeah, the accessibility makes a big difference. That it's more accessible for for anybody if you're interested in making music.
how much do you think is central the role of some of the bigger companies that make modules, like I think some of the most popular, like Doppler, Make Noise, Mutable Instruments, but do they like shape actually how people make the sounds?
As for Doppler, of course, the Doppler basic system is legendary, which is like a blueprint for what you start with in a modular synthesizer. And then Make Noise added, Make Noise and Veerle added to that mix, elements of West Coast synthesis, more the Buchla kind of way of working, or Serge way of working. Like the Maths is very much like a dual universal slope generator from a Serge system. So it's a thing that can be an oscillator, but it can also be an envelope generator. It can also be an LFO, and it can do a lot of things. So this is a different aesthetic and a different way of working from the things that Doppler did, were mostly based on the way Moog systems or East Coast systems were working. And then Mutable, Émilie Gillet, introduced digital modules really to that scene, to that way of working, and transformed what was happening. Because now it's really normal for your module to be digital inside. You use it in an analog way, but there's actually a computer behind that, and clouds and rings and stuff like that. I mean, there's a saying that goes rings into clouds, which is a modular synthesis trope of a certain sound, and that's all because of Émilie Gillet's brilliant code and also hardware design. That she also open sourced everything of it, and she's now stopped making modules because she was like, it's no fun anymore, which I think is too bad because her work was absolutely brilliant. But I guess this her legacy is still there.
Yeah, I guess this also relates to like open source being on one end being really great because people can learn a lot, but also open source has this thing where it's everybody's sort of thing. Yeah. And how do you sort of keep value to if everything is open source and you could build everything yourself? There's still always going to be a wish for certain makers that just make certain modules or certain products. Because, I don't know, I think it's also just a character that people choose as a musician, and you start modular, then I really sometimes talk to people that say like, well, I love this brand and I stick to it. And then others have this modular synth that has everything different.
In some cases makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you look at a complete Veerle system, is so absolutely attuned. All these modules are electronically so attuned to each other that it's its own thing. But I have nothing. My modular is a patchwork of tens of different companies. So.
Yeah. In this environment that is a lot based, as you said, on DIY, putting pieces together, and also crafting your own sound, also in a physical way. Do you think that softwares like VCV Rack are a good introduction, apart from the money, or is it limited in a way?
I think VCV Rack is brilliant, and it's a brilliant introduction into modular, and it's definitely not limited. Actually, it's very much unlimited. I mean, if you want 1,000 VCOs, you don't have to go all Sam Battle and build all of them. You can just copy and paste 1,000 VCOs, which is, you could really think of, is this useful? But maybe. So it's in a kind of way it's unlimited. Like VST plugins can be unlimited, which is, I think, not necessarily a good thing. If you have to limit yourself, but stop. VCV Rack is a brilliant thing, and it's a brilliant gateway into how modular works. Educational also. I use it every day in my education work. Yeah, it's a very good way to learn about things, and it's a very good way to learn about sound, about synthesis and all that. But it doesn't replace my modular for me, because I love tactile interaction with the thing. Like actual patching cables and actual twisting knobs makes so much of a difference that and also, I don't want to sit behind a computer all day.
Yeah, I think also VCV Rack is nice for education, because it really helps if you have a class and 10 people show up and they all have different stuff in their modular. It's going to be really hard to do a class together, and now if everybody can just download it. You can even make you can share modules that we're going to use in that class, and it just makes it nice and accessible. But the same way, I wouldn't use it in my live setup.
And now I just wanted to ask you if you want to tell us what, apart from modulation, what you do with Sonar Traffic and Acid the Solder Club.
Acid Solder Club is now 5 years old, and it was started mostly because I was really missing like a workspace outside of the academy or outside of an institute where you can work with electronics and with synth DIY and soldering and hacking. The idea was also that this place would be where people can learn about sound and experimental sound without having this idea of, okay, then I have to be a musician. Like in that sense, if you put a pickup mic on anything, it's an instrument. I wouldn't say it's community run because I'm the only person sort of managing the whole thing, but it is a lot of events. I listen to what people like. If you hear something like, oh, guitar pedals, I'm like, well, maybe I can find somebody in the Netherlands who makes guitar pedals and who wants to do a workshop about that. So the idea is also not that I'm the only teacher, but that people can teach through Asset Solder Club also. And have jam sessions or open soldering evenings, all kinds of things. With these events, you can really see the difference between people that are like very technical and they have a lot of skills, maybe like audio engineer, electronic engineer, or some sort of engineering side of things. And then you have artists and musicians who a lot of times want to build more electronic works, but they don't know how. And then you have the engineers who sometimes are like, oh, I'm so bored, but they're very smart, but they're just bored with what they're doing at the moment. And then you throw them together in a space and then they start helping each other out, which is
chemical
nice
reaction and they start to explode.
Yeah, which is sometimes good, sometimes tiring, because you end up with like 10 people and then everybody's working on a little project and then somebody comes in with like, oh, my broken space echo, and then people just jump on this one project.
Oh, cool,
and yeah, it's like, oh, can we fix it? And I don't know, I think it's important that these places are here where people can get introduced to even making sound or synthesis or electronic instruments without an educational, like a whole education that you have to do, like a whole 2 years of a master's or something.
Sonar Traffic started as a place where you can record with vintage synthesizers, because I had this stupid collection of vintage synthesizers and I wanted to share that for a little bit of money. I try to make a job out of it as well. Nowadays I do mostly education and sound design. So I make a lot of presets for software instruments, also for hardware synthesizers. I do sound design for trailers, like big sound effects.
So whether you're dreaming of building your own Eurorack setup or just curious about modular synthesis, there is a lot to explore. If you're feeling inspired, maybe share this video with a friend who might be into modular. Who knows, maybe the more people get into it, the more affordable it will get for everyone. We can dream, right? Otherwise, if you just want to observe and learn, visit Modulation in Utrecht or Noodles Bar in Rotterdam, or find a similar event in your own town. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know what you think. Ciao.
Thank you all for being here. It's been amazing. Again.